Welcome, everybody. Good morning to you, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. I'm Keith Newton. I'm the Secretary General of CILT. It's my privilege just to kick the session up. I'll be very brief. For those joining from around the world and haven't been on before, just note that the webinar is being recorded, and you will be able to access that from in a couple of days' time. So you can access that on YouTube. Only the chair, the hosts, and the panelists have got their video enabled. So as attendees, you can see everybody, but we won't be able to see you. To join in, and we would encourage you to join in, please use the Q&A box for any questions. I'll introduce our host in a minute, but our host will pick up the questions as we go. So please feed them in right from the start of the webinar as we go through. If you've got any problems or you just simply want to say hello to people, then please use the chat box at the base of the screen. Welcome to this webinar. It is our 17th webinar. It's almost a year since we did the first one. Throughout CILT, there are now numerous others going through from the country organisations. But today, great pleasure for me to introduce our international president, Dato Radzak. He will say some words at the end. But importantly today, our host, Paul Brooks, who will introduce the speakers to you in a moment. Paul Brooks was our chair of our IMC, our International Management Committee, in 2013 and 14. Had an enormous amount to do with our branding, and you can see that brand on my shirt here. And then was our international president from 2015 and 16, and has always been focused on the growth strategy for CILT globally. Paul has had a business development career. Has been a business development professional in logistics and transport for over 35 years, remains extremely passionate about using innovation to deliver world-class partnerships. And a lot of that, I think, will come through today, through him and through the speakers. So, Paul, thank you so much for hosting this webinar. I will pass over to you. I'll disappear from the screens and return at the end. So, thank you. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you very much, Keith. And welcome everybody, either on the Zoom stream or on Facebook. You're very welcome, and we're delighted that you're joining us this morning. We've got a fantastic session. I'm really privileged to have both Craig and James with us this morning. I thought it would be helpful just to set a brief context for some of the challenges that we've been through over the last 12 months. And here in the UK, we had our lockdown anniversary yesterday. So as a consequence of that, that was quite a sort of challenging time for a lot of people. So as a team, we've been through a lot, but I just thought it'd be just helpful. These are some of the images that you might remember. That's an Australian supermarket with empty shelves. Here in the UK, we had similar images of empty shelves of product not being in supermarkets. However, as the journey unfolded, it was quite clear that in the grocery supply chain, it rose and met all the challenges. And the majority of grocers here in the UK were showing significant rises in activity. And so the volume of activity across the year rose significantly. And then the other feature, of course, globally, has been the rapid rise of online retail. And as you can see here in the UK, we've had record growth years of online retail. 74% year-on-year growth here in the UK. Interestingly, statistics that I saw was actually 40% of UK consumers have purchased a product online that they had previously only ever purchased in store before in 2020. Similarly, international sales were rising rapidly. People were trading across borders internationally, and also you can see that the cross-border e-commerce sales grew substantially as well during that time. Some other rapid stats. Mobile as a way of actually buying is set to reach 270 billion by 2025. I mean, numbers that are absolutely astronomical, up 2.5 times from 2020. So the continuing rise. Uber Eats, we've all been eating from home, up 224% year on year at the end of last year. In the US, e-commerce penetration accelerated by 10 years in 90 days. So the pressure on the supply chains to deliver was quite astronomical. China also has grown substantially, as you can see. 27.3% of its total retail sales are now in e-commerce. And we never talk about e-commerce without talking about Amazon. Amazon sales grew 38% in 2020 to 386 billion. And there are some challenges in inventories and SKUs and fashion retailing. Open shut has been right at the forefront of that. But what I wanted to just finish on before I introduce our speakers is actually the grocery supply chain has worked all the way through. And these customer facing roles, our colleagues in the grocery supply chain have had the challenge of dealing with COVID all the way through. And the British medical journey indicated at the end of October last year that an employee in the grocery supply chain and grocery retail was 5 times as likely to test positive for COVID-19 as any other colleague working in the UK. So some really sort of difficult times, some exciting times, but some salutary lessons as well as part of that. So I'm delighted that 2 colleagues, Craig and James, who I've been privileged to work with over the last 2 or 3 years very closely during this time, here to share some of their stories with us. Craig's going to talk first. We'll allow Craig to run through his presentations and then maybe grab 5 minutes of questions at the end of that, and then pass to James to do the same. And we'll capture some Q&A to put to them at both at the end of the session as well. Should take us about an hour to run through that, so a little bit of time for questions and a few questions at the end. But over to Craig. Craig is the Group Logistics Director of WM Morrisons Supermarkets PLC. Craig Morrisons is one of the largest supermarkets in the UK and has got a fantastic story. Craig has been is an experienced senior executive, having undertaken a range of business roles, predominantly in supply chain management, although I know his interests go right across the retail spectrum. Craig's roots have always been in logistics, starting as a warehouse operative and built from there for a fruitful career in various companies, including Morrisons, Safeway, Asda and M&S. So I think Craig is superbly well positioned to talk about some of the challenges over the last 12 months, but also where he's taking Morrisons and the transformation agenda that he has in mind as part of that. So Craig, you're very welcome. Thank you, and over to you.
Thanks very much, Paul, and thank you everybody for inviting me to come along today. It's a pleasure to be spending some time with fellow logistical individuals, to say the least, because there are other conversations that I get drawn into during the course of my 7 days of working, which when I'm in the logistics area, it feels a lot more comfortable. I guess Paul's done the introductions and very kindly talked about my career history. So working across from the age of 18, 19 to 50 years of age now, working solely in logistics and supply chain in the retail sector. And what I want to try and do is just share with everybody a little bit about what we went through over the last 12 months, how we had to reset ourselves in an agenda perspective, and reset our purpose as an organisation. But then what did that mean for us in logistics, and how did we readjust and reset? So the focus areas for ourselves in logistics in Morrisons, joining the business just over 12 months ago from Marks and Spencer's. It's no surprise, and it's not a secret out in the UK that out of being in the top 4, that we've probably got the most ground to make up from a logistics perspective, which is one of the reasons that I joined join the business, because it's quite exciting, the challenges that we've got ahead, which I'll come on to later on. We are focused on the customer side of things. How can we provide a better service to our stores in order to give them a better opportunity to meet the public in a better way from a presentation of stock? How we operate from a solid cost base and a competitive cost base against the industry. Improving our overall performance and removing the unnecessary waste in our way of working. A big piece of work that we've worked on in the last 12 months is capacity, and it's at the heart of our 5-year plan that we're building right now. And how do we create the footprint, the concrete for the business to continue to grow rather than us being Achilles heel to them, and undoubtedly staying within a solid sustainability program, and in lines with where the government potentially will take us and where they really want to take us in 10 years' time, and some of the challenging environments of alternative fuels, and how do we take less miles off the road, etc., which we're working really hard on. Underpinning all that in logistics is driven by some 3 big enablers, which is great systems, and which we've got to introduce, and I would say reintroduce from when we had Safeways and Morrisons took over Safeways. I think there's a bit of a full circle taking place right now. And then great people and great processes. And without those 3, we can't achieve any of the focus areas, which are our key logistics building blocks. Just a little bit of context, I won't spend too much on this, but we've got 110,000 colleagues in the business. We deliver to 493 stores, that's our core store estate, but we also deliver to 1,800 wholesale stores, which is majority is a joint partnership with McColl's. We have 8 logistics sites, which are prime sites, which deliver direct to the stores. I have 1 NDC, a national distribution centre, which delivers slow-moving products. 18 manufacturing sites, which is unique against the other big 4 retailers. So we manufacture a good 40% of our products through our organisation of our own. We do the transportation out of those operations and deliver them into our logistics, 8 logistics sites, and then onward into stores. And then we have 5 wholesale CPC sites, which delivers to the 1,800 convenience stores within our organisation. We're superbly supported by our partnerships with Wincanton, and I know James is on after myself. We have Eddie Stobart's, and the way we've done that from a transport perspective is we have 50% split virtually between the transport operations, and what that's helped during the pandemic is that's allowed us to lean in really heavy into those businesses and lean on their support and their scale to be able to pull in from areas of where they potentially have slowed down because stores have closed, and they've had opportunity to upscale us, and I'll talk about some of those numbers in a second, or where they've just had to use their overall scale to come in and give us some muscle and get us through what has been a really, really challenging 12 months. DHL, they partnership us through the wholesale sites, and they pick and dispatch and transport to the 1,800 stores for us. XPO Logistics work on our Scottish solution up in Bells Hill, and then McColl's is the major partnership that we've got from a wholesale perspective. Just a quick network call out from a manufacturing network perspective. The reason I put this up is we're going through a major transformation right now in our transport solution, and I'll talk about it more later, but you can clearly see all those operations there, plus my wholesale operations, plus my regional distribution centres, plus my national distribution centre. When I walked into this business, we're all planning independently from a transport perspective, and still are until I execute the first stage of the major transport transformation. And what we'll be doing is we'll be splitting the country into north and south for the first half, for the first part of the programme, which will take us 12 to 18 months. And then for the second part of the programme, it'll take us to one national plan, which is going to be quite a challenge. And we're going to need some new technology, we're going to need some new people, we're going to need some new experts, and we're definitely going to need some really solid partnerships with our third-party support groups. So how did COVID-19 impact the business? I think it's fair to say I'm immensely proud of working for Morrisons during this period, because I think the way our executive team have reacted to this pandemic right from the start, in pulling us in as a leadership team and changing our purpose. And we had some great plans laid out as a business last year. We were heading for fantastic growth, some good heavy volume coming through the organisation, which is always healthy, and it was an exciting programme. There was a lot of new people coming into the team at a senior level, and the business had come off some big recovery programmes over the previous 5 years. So we were set up very, very well. But we sat down as a leadership team, and the exec approached and said, we're going to change our purpose, and our purpose will be around feeding the nation, and presenting that it's more than our jobs, and basically giving ourselves to the British public, and making sure that through what was going to be a really, really difficult time as individuals in every individual different circumstance, in every different household, were going to either prosper or struggle. And there was one end of the scale to the other end of the scale in this. And we felt that there was more struggle than prosper in this horrible pandemic that we're coming out of, hopefully in the next few months. So we set about, well, what does that mean for us? What do we need to stop doing, and what do we need to start doing? And hopefully I can share a little bit of that with you. Paul's already just alluded to the nearly 9% increase in spend from the customers. So we had to reset ourselves in terms of, well, what does that mean in terms of no one's going to be going on holidays? Well, people are going to be drinking alcohol at home. Restaurants are going to be closed. People are going to eat outlets. That means more food's going to flow through. However, it'll be smaller basket size, or will it be a smaller basket size? Will it be an increased basket size? What does that mean for logistics? What does that mean for supply chain? What does that mean for our suppliers? And as we started to get into the panic buying, which was the first taste of the stretch in supply chain and logistics, then we started to quickly realise this is going to be tough. And when the shelves started to get stripped bare, we felt the suppliers starting to squeeze. The panic buying was relentless for about 3 to 4 weeks, because the British public was still not bought into which direction the government were going to take this. The government was still learning and finding their feet in their decision making with their scientists, and that was always creating confusion, but creating more panic. Our case volume year on year was increasing by over 20%, and in some quarters, in some weeks, 35%. We had to get very, very quickly with our supply base, understand their capacities, understand their ability to keep servicing us. What lines did we need to switch off, and which did we need to prioritise? How did we need to make sure that we helped our suppliers in terms of payment terms, and taking them off longer payment terms and paying them immediately to keep them flowing and keep them moving? And then how did we plan our events that were coming up in terms of summer events? Euros football is a big event for us. Christmas, Halloween, all these big events to us were obviously going to be disrupted, and we had to reset ourselves and say we need to just keep feeding the nation. And when you're going and shopping in these stores and feeling it yourself, and what really set in my mind was walking down a store, and an old gentleman must have been over 80 years of age, and he had a trolley in his hand. There was no way he was going to compete with any of the panic buy-in and the toilet rolls that were going off the shelf, or the cereals or the milk and etc. and he was walking around with an empty basket against a row of empty shelves. And that's when I first realised I've got to do something different. We've got to do something different as a business here. This has got to be a complete change of direction. So we heavily depended on our people. Without the tremendous attitude, commitment, loyalty, bravery of individuals within my logistics team, within the Wincanton team, within the Stobarts team, within the XPO team, within the DHL team, and without the leadership and the desire to change our purpose, then we would never have got through this. We brought people from Manchester Airport, from Gatwick Airport, from Heathrow Airport, who were being laid off by EasyJet, Jet2. We went into mass recruitment as colleagues of ours started to dwindle and unfortunately either catch COVID or had to go shielding. We had to readjust our labour profile. My people director, Jodie, was working round the clock to just keep reintroducing new people to the business and keep training and supporting management teams in terms of trainers, training profiles, recruitment programs, interview process, assessment centre process, etc. Albeit we had to tighten those up to make it go quicker, and trying to manage that through panic buy-in, volume increases. I went from a weekly volume that we deliver in logistics. We were delivering at the point about 17.5 million cases that we were sending through. We quickly shot to 21 million cases a week. I remember Trevor, my COO, coming to me and saying, I need you to do 24 million. And trying to do that as 600 people are going off sick. And I'm introducing new colleagues that are used to being air stewardesses or baggage handlers in the airport or working in B&Q or whatever it may be. But we had to readjust ourselves and reset. We did a lot of things inside to protect our colleagues in terms of what did the social distancing look like. So you're trying to pick all this volume and keep people 2 meters apart. What did the canteen extensions look like? We couldn't fit everybody in the canteen, so we introduced marquees to the sides, hand sanitize everywhere. And then also from a testing perspective, how could we make sure that people were feeling protected by a testing program that we could put in place in the sites to make people feel comfortable that should they be feeling poorly, get a test quickly. Should they see somebody that's gone off poorly and coming back, am I at risk? No, because we've done the testing, etc., etc. So it became not only a recruitment surge, but a protection surge as well. So once we have got colleagues, we needed to make them feel safe. And we needed to make people feel comfortable in coming to work. Other drivers while in lockdown. So this is quite a proud moment for Morrisons. So we quickly realised the people that were going to struggle, the people that couldn't get out of their houses, people who were frightened of going out of their houses, the vulnerable who required additional support. So we developed what we call food boxes and eat fresh boxes. And in these food boxes, basically, it's putting essential products into a box. We set it up quickly. We conveyor belts inside our distribution centres, and we pulled stock from the warehouses. Got a number of temporary colleagues into the operation, and we filled food boxes up. And we started to distribute them through doorstep deliveries. We started to distribute them to NHS hospitals. We started to distribute them to vulnerable people who were struggling. We set up a customer call centre in here where the elderly or the vulnerable or the disabled could ring us up and say, I can't get to the store. Can you help me? Can I place an order? Yes, you can place an order. We'll have your delivery to you on this day. And we quickly started to reorganise and reset. We then started to reintroduce to over 200 stores online service as well, because we quickly knew we were going to grow online. The business was always going to do that, but we accelerated that so quickly in our business to reset and operate a new online service across a further 200 stores was a remarkable achievement. We also started to do charity food banks and making sure that the extremely vulnerable and the extremely at-risk people were getting what they needed from the environments that they usually get their food, unfortunately, from the food banks. On top of that, we had some, because of the outstanding people, we had some Pam and Neil, who were both recognised with British Empire medals. And I know a lot of people in retail have received this. Our business received 6, and 2 of them in logistics, which I'm immensely proud of. And the efforts that Pam did in working out in the community, Neil in terms of, he flew around nearly every operation for me, and helped in terms of areas that were in trouble and needed some support, where we lost, 50% of a management team. I think all my senior management team contracted the virus, unfortunately. I think 50% of my site managers contracted the virus, and definitely 50% of my senior leadership team and my DCs contracted the virus. So we had to keep replacing and reshuffling ourselves around the network, which is a very, very large network, to make sure that we kept the wheels moving and we kept everything moving, and as well as 17 million to 24 million. The Foodbox operation, we started it with Essential Box. We built up those volumes from a modest level to around 25,000 a week, and we're still doing them now. So it's something that's stuck within the business at the moment, because people are still saying they need it, they still want it. What that looks like after the pandemic, they're further discussions that I'm sure the executive will have. It's morphed itself and grown into including events now, such as the VE box and Essentials and Baby box. And then we've got a recipe box on Eat Fresh now. So the public are really buying into this and really see it as a new innovative approach to retailing. And it's also giving people security and comfort in their own homes, that they can get these boxes delivered and not put themselves at risk in going out. Even though the vaccinations are well underway, but still people feel exposed. I still see it in my parents when I have conversations with them. So how is logistics changing in Morrisons then? We've done extremely well through the 12 months in terms of, I said to you at the beginning, we need to move into the 21st century, whether it's with systems, whether it's with people, whether it's with processes, whether it's with automation, and we're laying down quite an exciting future now at Morrisons from a logistics perspective. And what I'm immensely proud of is the team have delivered change through the last 12 months through a pandemic, and I'm extremely proud of the group of individuals that have done this, and I'm extremely proud of the support from this organisation to continue to fund and drive those changes, knowing that the future will come out of the pandemic, and we have to be in a better place to grow as further as an organisation. We've introduced new technology and new warehouse systems into all our fresh operations over the last 12 months. We're finishing the last 2 now. We've put all our operations on cages in the fresh operations, which makes it easier for our stores in terms of receiving the product. And we've introduced a new transport planning system that is going to allow us to optimise and plan multiple operations rather than just a restricted individual. We've introduced a brand new leadership team. So I think in my distribution centres, every single site manager has changed. In my senior leadership team, 50% of it has changed. And then we've reorganised ourselves below and streamlined our teams to create great leaders, not just great managers. So the industry is crying out for leadership, and not just managers. I'm very, very passionate about how do we develop people, how do we communicate to people, how do we involve and engage colleagues in terms of decision making, and allow colleagues to deliver some decision making through the DCs and through the supply chain. Rather, every time somebody walks through one of my distribution centres, I get a free brain and a free pair of hands. and for years we've been using their hands. Now's the time to start using their brains. So we're now on a cultural charge to bring together the whole of logistics on the back of this pandemic, where we've delivered great camaraderie as a group of individuals across the whole of the network, and we want to continue that push and continue that involvement to keep our colleagues engaged, to be able to drive something different and involve people in all the decisions that we're going to make. So inside that capacity model that we're building, and we've built 5 years at the moment. We're on to the next 5 years as we speak. But basically, what I'm trying to do in warehouse operations is bring us ahead of the 21st century. And how do we move away from pencil and paper checking into RFID checking on the inbound, working with our suppliers from an ASM perspective, and communications from suppliers down electronically to us, which is far more advanced for us to be able to scan in, take it through our pick operations, have better stock controls, better stock accuracy, and then be able to scan out to our stores and introduce tagging, whether it's internal to the cage or external to the cage. And then how do we get it onto a transport operation that's fully tracked from a fleet perspective, but it's into a fully optimized route compliance program that we've built as well. And from a warehouse perspective, we're currently redesigning our network. We're currently looking at, well, what do the new DCs look like in the future? And really exciting is, you know, when I speak to David Potts, our CEO, when we talk about, well, how far do we want to go with this? The positive side of this in the business is we want to go all the way. So, you know, we're currently designing a fully automated solution where we would, the minute it comes off a supply vehicle, it goes onto the conveyor belt, then it doesn't get touched until it comes out fully picked and assembled for a store. But even further than that, we want to give the stores an even better service by presenting it to the store in exactly how every single store is laid out. So we'll be able to pump into this automation solution. The end product for the retail will be, as your store is laid out, every single individual store will be different, including the cold stores, including wholesale stores. Then what we will do is align the algorithms in the presentation of the product, which will come fully stacked like a proper Lego block, and present it in store. So in other words, we're creating one-way stock, and that allows us just-in-time stock to be able to wheel it off the wagon, fully scanned. It'll scan under a reader inside the store, and it'll roll straight onto the shop floor, rather than it having to be dismantled, decanted, and getting itself set to be merchandised into the store. All that will be taken away. We'll do that by, we're going to introduce obviously high bay storage. We'll then bring it out from high bay storage. We will then dismantle into single case and put it onto trays, go into a shuttle. They'll come out of the shuttle as the orders are generated, and then it'll get picked by the automation, presented into automation, and then presented to the loading banks. It's really, really exciting from a warehouse perspective. We're on that journey. We're designing now, and we're looking what that looks like in the future. From a transport perspective, I'm also really excited in terms of how do we take the 19 manufacturing operations, the CPC operations for wholesale, and the 8 RDC operations and the NDC operation, and how do I create one national transport plan? And that is in 2 to 3 years' time. But reeling back from that, instead of planning individually by these operations, we are introducing now a new routine planning tool, which is going to allow us to plan those on a multiple basis. So we're going to start by joining regions together. So we'll take the Northeast, the Northwest, Scotland and Yorkshire, and we'll put it into the North. And that'll be the RDC network. Then we'll do the South, and then we're going to blend in the manufacturing sites. Then we'll blend in the wholesale sites. and then eventually we'll end up taking the north and south out, and we'll end up with one national distribution network from a transport optimization perspective. I don't think that'll be enough going forward. We're introducing backhaul into the business, which has been a lag, and one that's a huge opportunity to us, and one we're exploiting by restructuring our teams, introducing new backhaul managers to the business, and working with our supply base, because we've got Stobarts, we've got Wincanton, we've got XPO, who are all delivering for top 20 IGD customers, and that opportunity to tap into their network as well as tap into our network and bring that product into us and get it in at the times that we want it a lot quicker, taking it away from the supply chain, will be for Morrisons revolutionary. So and quite exciting in terms of profit it's going to offer us, but service it's going to offer us as well. But also it fills the empty legs. I do believe we'll end up being pulled by the Transport Minister at some point in terms of how do we do further collaboration, and by using our third-party providers with their other customer base, how do we collaborate a lot further inside a logistics UK industry network. We're also going to digitalise a lot more from a driver perspective. So I want to introduce handheld terminals into the transport operations. This is where a driver will come in, have a handheld terminal, all their work for the day will be on there. All the information around the vehicle will be on there in terms of what route they're going, where they're going, the vehicle checks. They'll do the vehicle checks on it. If the police pull them up on the road, they'll have all the information about service records, etc., related to their vehicles. So quite an exciting time for Morrisons, but it may not be to some people out there who are already doing that. But trust me, this is the excitement of coming through the Morrisons logistics network journey right now. I think also we're working on, from the fleet perspective, what does the future fleet look like? So it won't be wrong of me to say that we've got some old fleet on the road. I like to replace the fleet on a more frequent basis, but we want to introduce more double deck journeys to our stores, more double deck journeys into our trunking operations, and then what does the future fuel solution look like? As we're getting challenged on waste, and we've got a tremendous sustainability program in the organisation, how do we turn our waste into fuel? And how are the operators working on their new tractors and their new fuel opportunities, and what sort of fleet and how we're going to operate in the next 5 years, which is for us is quite a big piece of work, because we're operating with over 700 tractors. We've got a fleet of over 2,000 trailers, and then additional to that, I've got around about 350 rigids. So there's a big piece of work for us to do there, and then there's a big piece of work on the sustainability program in terms of what does a new DC look like? How do we power that operation from an electricity perspective with solar panels, harvesting the water? So there's a really exciting agenda here for Morrisons that I'm extremely proud of to be leading. I'm really excited. I'm energised. I'm working with a great executive team, a great senior leadership team in Morrisons. We're taking all the events of the last 12 months and what did we learn, what went well, what do we keep, and there is a hell of a lot more that we're keeping than losing, because yes, we had a great plan, as I said right at the beginning of last year, but that plan's shifted, moved on, and we've learned a lot, and we've got to take that learning with us and introduce it into new innovation into the Morrisons business over the next 5 years. So I think that's pretty much shared my journey in the last 12 months, Paul. Hopefully that's been worthwhile and people have found it interesting.
Yeah,
Anybody wants to ask me any
some
questions?
great feedback on the chat, Craig. Thank you for that, and lots of super insights. And I love the Feed the Nation purpose. That was a real sort of a hearts and mind capture, wasn't it? I think a lot of people will support that. There was one quick question. There's a couple for later, but one quick question now around inbound deliveries during COVID. Did you sort of reflect as a team on how you might do those in a contactless way, or were there any systems that might help that or not?
Yeah, so just firstly going back to supporting the suppliers. So as you would expect, they were extremely stretched in terms of the volumes they were having to deliver. And as we know, our suppliers don't have the biggest transport solutions attached to it. And first thing we did was step in and say, what support do you need on that? And again, that was using the Wincanton, the XPO, the DHL, all those groups who were working in partnership with us to say, look, we're going to need to step in and support these groups. And also they would be obviously being stretched by other contracts that they've got with other retailers. So that was the first point of support. The second point was the payment and keep them alive and keep them moving. They had their own absences as well that they were dealing with. But the next point was what we call green laning into the DCs and allowing the pace of our operations to be sped up. And with most suppliers that were deemed as an accurate performing supplier, then we would allow, the quick access, quick turnaround, and either green lane, or we would tip, unload, and repass the paperwork on the next deliveries, or electronically separately behind the scenes to keep the pace moving.
Yeah, that's great answer. Thank you, Craig. That's really good. So I'll leave the other. There's a couple more, but I'll leave those till later. I'll because I think I can ask those of James as well. They're more general questions, so I'll do that then. So thank you for the moment, Craig. That's really good. So I'm going to move on to James Hurrell now. James's presentation. James is the managing director of grocery and consumer for Wincanton PLC, which is the largest British logistics company. James is a dynamic managing director with over 17 years experience in third-party logistics. I know he doesn't look old enough, but James has always been at the forefront of creating and delivering and leading strategic customer solutions, both as Vice President for DHL and now in his current role at Wincanton. I know personally he is a passionate leader on health and safety, plus he's really focused on colleague well-being and is a champion in diversity for logistics operations. So James, can I pass over to you?
You can, Paul, and thank you for that kind introduction. I'll just share my screen. Can I do the usual confirm that you can see that okay, Paul?
Yeah, we can, James. Yeah.
Excellent, that's great. Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you to the CILT members across the world for the opportunity to share some thoughts with you today. And indeed, thank you, Craig, for a brilliant presentation, a great tone setter, and I couldn't agree more with your point around the industry needing to develop the leaders and not the managers of the future. And the store-ready automation and the transport vision looks super exciting. Over the course of the next 15 minutes or so, I'm going to introduce Wincanton and bring a third-party logistics perspective on the last 12 months that Craig has introduced, and talk about the impact of COVID and how we rose to the challenge with the support of our customers, and very much powered by our colleagues. I'll share what we've learned and how we'll apply it in the future, or how we hope to, and why, more than ever, it has really reinforced our view that the very best supply chains are collaborative, and that this represents an opportunity for the delivery of sustainable supply chain value in the grocery and consumer goods sectors. In terms of Wincanton, we're the largest British-owned logistics and supply chain company. We have over 19,000 colleagues, over 200 sites, 3,500 vehicles, and 14 million square foot of warehousing. We turn over about 1.2 billion, serving long-standing blue-chip customers across 4 key sectors. And we exist to be great people delivering sustainable supply chain value. And we do this by having an inclusive culture and nurturing talent and creating clear career paths, just like the one Craig described, from the floor right the way through to the boardroom. We have a very deliberate focus on key markets where we invest strategically, and we aim to deliver products and services and innovation right the way across the end-to-end supply chain, and deploy an operating model that's hopefully really easy for our customers to work with. And all of this is underpinned by our Wincanton way, which is a very personal and organisational commitment to living our values and, importantly, serving the communities in which we operate. We have a single operating business with 4 market-facing verticals that hopefully, in the way Craig described, create economies of scale for our customers when they need it most. In general merchandise, we manage multi-channel supply chains for the likes of B&Q and Screwfix and Halfords and Wilko. In public and industrial, we manage the inbound supply chain for Hinkley Point, the largest UK construction project, and we've just established inland clearance centres to support our country's preparation for Brexit. In digital and e-fulfillment, we've just opened the first third-party managed grocery customer fulfillment centre for Waitrose and our own hosted end-to-end e-fulfillment facility. And in grocery and consumer, where we have over 8,500 colleagues serving great grocery customers like Morrisons, Sainsbury's, Asda, Co-op, Waitrose, and in consumer, Kraft Heinz, Suntory, Britvic, and Nestle. So a wonderful client list we get to serve every day. Now, a year ago, COVID, as Craig's touched on, presented us with a whole series of new, different shaped challenges that we needed to rise to together to feed our nation at the most uncertain of times. And we had to rise to that challenge and those new challenges a number of ways. Firstly, in terms of colleague safety, we needed to rapidly implement new operational process at pace in what was an increasingly uncertain environment, keeping our colleagues safe and, most importantly, in the moment at an uncertain time. In terms of colleague well-being, we were immediately working crazy hours. You know, everyone in the industry will remember it. 24/7. It's tough when you keep trying to do that day after day. And our colleagues were fearful. They were fearful of the unknown. They were scared. There was personal worry. Our people teams were calling those who were absent either with COVID-related symptoms or with other concerns every day to check in on them. Our people teams are also having to deal with colleagues from worried partners who would have preferred their partner to be furloughed, so they were at home and safe. As the pandemic developed, we also were supporting bereaved colleagues and teammates, which was super tough within our depots. And we learnt about the importance of checking in with each other, and it's something that we aim to do twice a day with 2 colleagues as part of our fabric. In absence, we followed national, regional, and local curves. And what was really interesting about absence with COVID, it was really indiscriminate. When we see an increase in absence, it often affects the colleague community the most, but we found it affected whole departments, it affected managers, and therefore we lost an awful lot of organisational capability at the same time as experiencing record volumes, something we had to be enormously adaptable to. And as Paul touched on, the panic buying. The panic buying resulted in an unplanned Christmas for us, but for longer and on a regular basis through 2020. The distribution of volume also changed. It began with large peaks in the NDCs and then in the RDCs and then latterly in convenience depots as consumers moved from shopping in big stores further away from home to proximity buying, where they tended to buy closer to home, where they felt the safest. The supply chain also changed from being retailer demand driven to manufacturing and supply driven, which was really interesting as the customer's question changed from, can you supply me this please, to what can we have? Or indeed, what have you got? As the panic buying continued. We also had changing guidance, a new practice, often daily, as our Prime Minister announced the latest set of regulations that we had to respond to and implement. We also had increased external interest from the press, from the environmental health officers, and from the unions, which we had to proactively respond to at a time when we had never been busier. So what have we learned from rising to the COVID-19 challenge together with our customers? Well, we've taken and applied learning right the way across our business throughout the pandemic in a number of ways. Firstly, in terms of safety and pastoral leadership, creating a safe environment where our colleagues feel safe is always our #1 priority, but it became more pronounced. Pastoral leadership became more important, coming back to Craig's point around the leaders of the future. We had to actively live our DNA and care for our colleagues more strongly than ever, reinforcing what is really important as part of our leadership DNA. What was interesting too, positively, was it was a great opportunity for our teams to develop, and our teams and people developed faster than ever. In operations, we know that we're at our best when we're busy, but getting out of our comfort zone is really where the magic happens. And stretched operations, new ways of working, and new startups have created brilliant learning, development, and promotion opportunities for our talented colleagues right the way across the business. In terms of agility, we found that we were more agile than we ever thought we could be. Ordinarily in the grocery supply chain, we planned Christmas 4 months ahead. We delivered a number of COVID peaks in 2020, often turning them on in 4 hours in response to the latest government guidance. Now, to do that well, strong leadership, clarity of communication were absolutely critical at all levels, which I think again talks to Craig's point about the leaders of the future. Especially with that evolving government advice, we needed to ensure that organisationally we had consistent communications, especially regarding safety and COVID and the latest government guidance. That was key. What was really encouraging was that for the first time, our colleagues got the recognition that they truly deserve. Food, logistics and supply chain workers are key workers. We always knew that, but they were formally recognised, and that's super important. Logistics is now a lot sexier, and it's certainly more highly regarded than it was before, which is great news for future talent coming into the industry. But importantly, consumers also know more about their food supply chains than they did before. And that has led to their trust increasing. In response to the latest government guidance or the latest surge in COVID infections, people do buy a bit more of everything and keep their cupboards stocked full. But the panic buying has dramatically reduced. The situation that Paul and Craig described that we had to respond to a year ago, I don't think we'll need to respond to again in the same way as a result of that consumer trust increasing. And what was key to all of this was collaboration, unleashing the power of vertical and horizontal supply chain collaboration. Now, our government relaxed some of the competition laws to enable us to do this, to enable retailers to share space and share stock and share assets, which was enormously helpful. And our reflection is that that was really easy to enable with a common purpose. I guess our challenge is, how do we continue that in a sector when, compared with others, sometimes struggle to collaborate perhaps as well as it could or should. But last year we learned that the best supply chains are collaborative. So how can we be more collaborative in the future? Really taking and applying the learning and the experience of 2020 and the pandemic to our future business models. Well, first of all, sharing information and becoming better at it and making part of that, sharing information, our DNA, and aligning supply with demand right the way across the supply chain. Now, Craig might not talk about this, but I know that all of our grocery customers, logistics directors would all love better forecasts from the trading, supply chain and retail teams. Now, Craig's business is different to many others because it's the most integrated grocer in the UK. But we know that better sharing of data and information would enable all of the grocery supply chains and indeed the upstream manufacturers to move from a silo-based approach to a holistic end-to-end approach. And sharing that data is absolutely key to that. But also external help is often needed. The picture you can see is Mark White, our groceries code adjudicator. Now, no other industry sector needs a regulator to sit between the key actors in the supply chain. And when benchmarked with other sectors, the link between consumer goods companies and grocery retailers is often significantly less collaborative than other supply chains, and that's often driven by commercial tension. Even within single organisations, internal departments can sometimes struggle to collaborate because of competing objectives. Often, a third party is required to facilitate and be that catalyst for collaboration, supporting established and trusted relationships and turning them into collaborative relationships that unlock value. Oh, what have I done there? Sorry about that. Less independence is also key, and more teamwork and a growth mindset are great enablers for collaboration. I think learning to let go a little and not do everything ourselves, opening our minds and hearts to new ways of working as we did so well last year, are also critical success factors collaboration. But the case for collaboration is absolutely compelling. Working with partners increases resilience and reduces risk. In the picture there is Professor Richard Wilding's Temple of Supply Chain Resilience. That's worth looking up. And the first two pillars he talks about are agility and internal and external collaboration, exactly the collaboration that Craig described this morning. And also working with partners broadens your horizons individually and organisationally. It enables people development, and you know what? It's fun. There are also significant cost and sustainability benefits that can be delivered through collaboration. Research by Accenture demonstrates an up to 2-to-1 cost advantage for the best-in-class collaborative supply chains versus their average peers. And sustainability is an increasingly important prize. Asset sharing and integrated collaboration deliver environmental value, enabling active delivery of corporate sustainability goals and brand values that are increasingly important to consumers and colleagues alike. Collaboration is also super powerful. It increases availability, it shortens supply chains, but also it enables new, fantastic capabilities when we need them most. Craig touched on some of those, but we could not have responded to the pandemic, feeding our nation in the way that we did as teams, as organisations, and as an industry without the power of collaboration. Mobilising 3,500 people in a matter of weeks to deliver the opening of 5 inland clearance centres as we prepared for Brexit would be impossible without collaboration. Executing Project Moonshot, where we received, kitted and delivered 12 million COVID testing kits to 6,500 schools in a week, enabling children to go back to school. Again, impossible without collaboration. And indeed, delivering the supply chain of the future, where we deploy new data and technology in the way that Craig has described, taking and applying learning from COVID-19 and enabling great people to deliver sustainable supply chain value will absolutely be powered by collaboration. So hopefully this presentation has provided a useful introduction to Wincanton and some insight to what we experienced during COVID-19 in grocery and FMCG supply chain operations, as well as how we've taken and applied learning and hope to in the future as we develop the collaborative supply chains of the future. Thanks for your time today.
Very good. Thank you, James. That was really insightful and super helpful as well in terms of sort of wrapping the challenges of the supply chain. Obviously, we've been focusing on it a little element from a UK perspective and the story of collaboration in the UK, but clearly it's been the same across the world. And many of our participants today will be recognising some of those issues and some of those traits as part of that. I think one of the sort of summary questions that's sort of coming through, James, I'll put it to you first, and I might actually then sort of revert it to Craig as well, actually. Food shortages, obviously within the supply chain, are perhaps a feature for the next few months still. In terms of sort of global food shortages. However, on the learning that we've been through in the last sort of 12 months, are we confident that the ability to keep the grocery shelves stocked, and the ability of our people and our colleagues to handle the flow through of food from the inland ports into our shelves, are we confident now that we have all the capability in place and the people in place to deliver that?
I can't speak globally, Paul, but I can tell you from the conversations that we have with our customers like Craig, but also at an industry level, that there has never been a greater level of collaboration to ensuring that shelves are stocked and consumers have that confidence that we've worked so hard as an industry to build post the pandemic kicking off, and indeed post those pictures that you shared from a year ago. So as a consumer, I feel more confident than ever. As a practitioner, I feel more confident than ever. I'd welcome Craig's views from a grocer's perspective.
Yeah, I mean, that question came from Hong Kong, so you can imagine that's a sort of challenging environment to deliver to at the best of times anyway. So Craig, similarly, are you, obviously you've worked through a lot of this now. How confident are you about the supply chain delivering full shelves?
I'm more confident now, 12 months on. Having experienced a lot of the blockages, I think it's not just connected to the pandemic. I think it's connected to Brexit, what we've gone through as a UK with the European side of things. So I have felt more challenges getting stock into Gibraltar than getting which is one of our second highest performing store in the business. I found that more challenging than getting stock inside the country. But I think suppliers and safety staple stock that's being put in place around other economical issues that are going on around in the UK and in Europe at the moment, I'm more confident with the decisions that have been made by retailers, by suppliers, and what they've done is they've brought the stock closer to their destinations, and I think because of all that other stuff, we're a lot better set from a supply-based perspective, especially on ambient, because it's easier to put that safety stock in place, which a lot of people have done in the UK, a lot of retailers.
That's really good. Yeah, no, thank you, Craig. And so another question for you both, but I'll start with Craig. It's probably a slightly more technical question from Peter. What he's talking about is about the congestion around loading docks and road congestion. You touched on it with your green laning, Craig, and sort of managing the DCs. Do you think that the infrastructure is now in a better place, or are you in terms with it better and sort of going forward in managing sort of road congestion and DC congestion, things like that, going forward?
That's a really, really good question. I think there's a lot of components attached to this. So I think from a DC perspective, unless you've got 1 million square feet everywhere, then you're always going to cry out for growth. You're not going to have enough space. And 9 times out of 10, the loading banks or the goods in banks are usually the governance around capacity constraints. And I think there's a lot of things you can do upstream on that. From a speeding up the operations from a technical perspective with systems and technology, and making sure that our relationships with our suppliers are far more advanced in terms of knowing what's coming before it arrives, dealing with the process before it arrives in the DC to speed it up in the DC, and then get them in and out of our DCs as quickly as we can with relatively minimum impact to any process or any payment process attached to that, or any accuracy or governance levels. I think then on the road is the traffic side of things, and introducing as much innovation as we possibly can to, firstly, in your own businesses, getting the double decks and maximising double deck operations, whether that's inbound supply, whether that's outbound to our stores. But then, as James has just alluded to there, how do you collaboratively join things up to stop a single deck going to Tesco's, a single deck going to Sainsbury's, and a single deck coming to us, when actually a double deck could do all three? And how do you make that? How do you make that achievable, but also wanting to do it as either as a third-party logistics provider or a supplier, and then outbound to that, how do you? I think the time will come, and I might get shut down for this, but the time will come where we'll see a Morrisons vehicle in a Tesco's yard, or we'll see a Tesco's vehicle in a Morrisons yard, and vice versa. Because I just think the government will force the agenda. I remember sitting with the Transport Minister 7-8 years ago, where we were talking about how do you take miles off the road, how do you take the fuel emissions down, etc. And we were even talking about, and I was having a joke with you guys earlier on, deliveries on barges, deliveries on the waterways, and etc. Now that's not acceptable from a day one to day two delivery, or day one for day one. You're never going to achieve that. But we've got to come up with better ways of working, because it's getting more congested in different parts of the country. Usually it was all just in the London area. We're now getting congested in Yorkshire on the M62. We're now getting congested in the middle of the M1. So I would rather the agenda's not forced on us, and I would rather collaboration came forward a little bit quicker, would be my view.
That's really good. Thank you, Craig. And so, James, just to sort of build on that, around working with major FMCG, companies, and I know Wincanton work with a lot of those, and teaming up. Is the same incentive there for the FMCG, the manufacturer and the supplier to the grocers, to aid congestion or reduce congestion and aid easy supply chain activity?
I think most definitely, because we've never had a greater capability to measure the value within a supply chain that you can unlock through collaboration. I think it's very important that there's a recognition from all of the actors in the supply chain to ensure success for all. As you set out to collaborate, there's no point doing collaboration if there's only one winner. It'll just stop and people will go back to what they were doing before. But I think I agree with all of the points Craig has made. But I think one of the key enablers is about data. One of the barriers to collaboration historically have been in individual legacy systems that sit within businesses that might be too difficult to enable a data flow. That's not the case anymore. So we can look at data in new ways, manipulate it in new ways, think in hours instead of days, and plan our businesses and create exactly that visibility Craig was talking about, that enables us to think about our operational processes and our resources in new ways to increase capacity.
That's really good, James. Thank you. I've got a question actually from Keith, so I'm going to shout that one out. So, but I think you've both touched on it. But as we sort of draw things to a close, how optimistic are you both that the sustained change that we've been talking about and the collaboration specifically in that will not revert to a sort of direct competitive overnight again, or has it changed forever? So I'll start with Craig on that one.
I think organisations have changed their mindsets, not just logistics, and I think that's all for the better. I think, and I think because corporately businesses are channeling the direction of the sustainability agenda, that will only help logistics down. That will only allow us and support us to make some decisions that potentially, I believe, some logistics directors or supply chain directors may have taken a step back from in the past. But I think if you can embrace that program that's coming from you corporately, and other organisations are working together at the top, then seamlessly the logistics operations should come through behind that in succinct in my eyes. And I feel it's definitely high on the agenda in the Morrisons business. I think it's high on the agenda in the logistics industry. It's high on the agenda in the third parties and the operators that support us. So I only see a positive energy around this now, and I'm really excited and really looking forward to contributing to part of that from Morrisons' perspective.
Awesome, thanks, Craig. And James, final word from yourself.
Yeah, I think things have changed for good, and hopefully for the better. We've seen the massive increase in e-commerce, Paul, that you described, more groceries, deliveries to home, and Craig talked about some of the innovation that Morrisons have delivered to consumers. I, like Craig, believe that sustainability is key, because it gives us the license to collaborate in new ways and think in new ways, aligned with the purpose of our organisations, as well as the corporate targets we've set, but most importantly, aligned with the values of consumers and colleagues alike. It's got to be the right thing to do, and it's now becoming hard-coded in our DNA. Very
good. Well said. Thank you. So thank you, gentlemen, both, for that really superb set of contributions to this debate. I'm going to close off, hand back to Keith. I know Dato Razak was going to say a few words as well. So Keith, back to you.
Thank you, Paul. That was excellent. But I'll allow our international president, as he should do, to say a few words of thanks on our behalf from CILT. So over to you, Dato, in Kuala Lumpur.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you to our two excellent speakers for today's webinar. Thank you, Paul Brooks, for your ability to moderate the session. is really quite on time, for everyone. May I, on your behalf, thanks Craig and James for the input into an excellent session, for enabling this webinar to happen, and for his wonderful job as the chair and coordinator of the Q&As. We have heard how two of the major retail stores and logistics businesses in the UK have had to respond in a remarkable year. We have heard of their spirit to succeed despite the major issues and the innovation and change they have executed so successfully. This spirit and his innovation I can see globally in the different countries across our CILT family. We will need to hold on to that and use that as we face more challenges this year ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, as the CILT International President, I have been leading the organization through a difficult period globally. This no doubt is impacting you all too in the logistic and transport environment all over. In dealing with the issues, there also arise opportunities. My message has been that failure is not an option in sorting out the problems, and that control and collective action need to be taken. So we have shared best practice and experiences with each other and built solutions together. This also leads us to focus on the opportunities and how we will successfully take advantage of this in 2021 and the future. Never has logistics and transport been so critical to the success and well-being on mankind as in this year. We have responsibilities as professionals in providing the best possible input into some very big issues for the world. To do that, we are in CILT focusing on key issues in the global supply chain, sustainability, and the technology to reduce our impact on the environment, best practice in crisis and risk management, and the embracing of digital technology to create effective solutions. At CILT, we are uniquely placed to have professionals deliver this thing as we cover the world and are constantly creating new branches in new regions. We operate with inclusivity, caring, and supporting our professional members wherever they are. More than that, as COVID-19 lingers on like no sign of subside, the issue at hand now is about life and livelihood to our members, families, associates, and partners all over. We at CILT International will devote our time, energy, and mind to find ease and comfort for them, especially at the time more and more difficulty and challenge that they have to endure. In our series of webinars, we are now moving from the COVID to the post-COVID world and begin next month a key series on sustainability. Sustainability is the single most important subject for the post-COVID logistics and transport world, and is a challenge that exceeds that of COVID itself. It may not have the same immediate impacts, but longer term, it poses questions and issues that we must face as an industry. On 27 March is the Earth Hour. With Willat Global, we want to drive this as an initiative, as sustainability is our high priority. Thanks, Willat Global, for your strong passion and support on green technology and sustainability. So do join our sequence of webinars and bulletins over the next 3 months, April to June, as we focus on the subject. Stay safe, and thanks again for joining us today. Stronger together, and goodbye. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Radzak. that's hopefully given you insight into our next series of webinars, but I'm sure we all take away the enthusiasm and the example of collaboration that was coming out so strongly there today, and it was so interesting. So I'm sure this webinar will be watched by many. We will be putting it out in a couple of days, subject to approval from our speakers, in a couple of days' time on our international website. So look out for it there. But thank you, everybody. Thank you, James. Thank you, Craig. And thank you, Paul, for pulling this all together. And have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.